Hi, we're Josh
and Ariel Wamsley,
owners of Green Valley Tree LLC, based in North Windham.
We're proud to sponsor Connecticut East This week and to serve the communities of Windham and New London counties with our tree removal and plant healthcare services.
Visit our website at greenvalleytreeworks.com for a full list of our services or give us a call on 860-234-4041. We look forward to hearing from you.
The 2022 legislative session was a short one and ended in May of this year. So what got passed and what still needs to be looked at? We talk with two Eastern Connecticut legislators to find out more. Plus we take a look at other stories making the headlines from around the region. This is Connecticut East This Week. Hello, I'm Brian Scott Smith. The Connecticut legislative session for 2022 was a short one this year, from February to May, as it's also an election year. And COVID-19 didn't just disrupt all of our lives, but that of the legislative process as well, causing extra work for the state legislators trying to catch up from previous sessions and process as many bills as they could in the shorter session. So what exactly got through and what still needs to be worked on? I caught up with Democrat State Senator Kathy Austin, who represents the 19th District in the region, and Republican State Representative Greg Howard, who represents the 43rd District, to find out what they and their colleagues got up to during the 2022 legislative session. State Senator Kathy Austin and State Representative Greg Howard, to you both, welcome back.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We had both of you on before the short legislative session started earlier this year. It ended May 4th. Kathy, I'm going to turn to you first. There was a lot of business, obviously, that needed to be got through because obviously COVID had caused, a little bit of a backlog. What were some of the things that you felt that, you did manage to get through that you were happy to see?
I'm chair of 2 committees. I'm also on 6 other committees, but as chair, you get to set the agenda that will be in your respective committees. And on public safety, we did a whole plethora of bills relative to some adjustments to the police accountability bill, but we also did a lot of work relative to mental health and catalytic converters and other things. And so that's one thing that had to get done that were all directly relative to the pandemic. On appropriations, every single bill that requires money in it comes through appropriations. Personally, I've been working on a number of areas concerning non-for-profits with social safety net for those with developmental disabilities, those with mental health concerns, those daycare providers. This was actually an extremely busy session to deal with issues concerning the pandemic, but things that we had been working on for almost a decade now, in particular relative to the developmental disabilities world.
And Greg, from your point of view as well, like we said, it was a short session. It's an election year. There was business, from the previous session that's to get done. And as Kathy just pointed out, it was very, very busy. How did you find it?
So it was, as Kathy said, it was a very, very short session with a lot of work to do. So it was much more of a sprint than a marathon. But as she said, the chair set the agendas. But I'll say, as a ranking on public safety, we sit in those screening meetings together. And I think just about every bill came out of public safety with bipartisan support, but for maybe 1 or 2 where it was just sort of, things that just need to be worked on a little bit here and there. But generally, we worked really well on it. It was nice because we had to work together. Kathy and I always work well together, as we've talked about previously, but, both sides of the aisle really had to work together to get things done because we just didn't have a lot of time. So from that standpoint, that was my first short session, but it was a great thing to see, sort of that bipartisanship. But me personally, there were some things that I really wanted to get done. I work a lot with the youth, and, children's mental health has been at the forefront of importance for me since really before I ran, and in part why I ran. And, we did extend a child guidance center to Pawcatuck to make it more accessible to folks in my district, and Kathy was helpful with me on that. And then I had some of the local fire departments came to the table and said, well, we used to get reimbursement for calls on the highway that's costing us a lot of money. We go up there often. And I called Kathy and I said, we could run this through public safety and approach, she was the perfect person to talk to. And again, that came through. So it was good. And, as you talked about, we did a lot of work on police accountability. We're still tweaking that police accountability bill in public safety. One of the biggest things that happened was the police accountability bill that passed in 2020 required all municipalities to have CLIA accreditation, which is an expensive, CLIA is a private organization, expensive proposition. And in some cases, actually, some municipalities really didn't have the infrastructure in their building to reach it. So recognizing what we were trying to accomplish there with a standardized accreditation for all agencies, we partnered, if you will, with Connecticut Post and their accreditation standards, which meet sort of the same professional standards, but at a much lower cost for the municipalities. And again, there was a couple of stumbling blocks, or one major stumbling block in the legislature with that Kathy and I we continued. We knew it was important. We worked together. We pushed, and got it done. So that was a huge relief, I think, for a lot of municipalities. So a lot of good things did get done.
And Kathy, I want to turn back to you, and Greg, I'll be asking you this as well, because you just touched upon it. Mental health for kids, it's become a very hot button issue. We see reports in the media on a fairly regular basis. There have been surveys carried out by various school districts, concerns about the mental health for children because of the situation that COVID brought about. Just talk to us, Kathy, a little bit about that, because obviously good to see that got through, and obviously we need to protect our children.
Well, absolutely, we need to protect our children, but mental health has been an issue that I have been working on for literally since I entered the General Assembly, and have been able to address some of those issues. This year, we worked on children's mental health and adult mental health in a number of bills that came out of both the House and the Senate that converged together. And I would say that all three of those bills, SB 1, SB 2, and 5001, were all supported on a bipartisan basis. And the whole legislature recognized that we had the ability to fund programs that would make a real difference in people's lives, mobile crisis centers across the state 24/7, to take some of the pressure off of other portions of our social safety net that were expected to deal with mental health concerns and never had the resources. So this year, there were transformative changes made to mental health. We're looking at employing more social workers so that schools can access that care too. We put in, within the confines of the mental health bill, we're building out hospital areas to help out, to make sure that children have beds should they end up in the hospital. But ultimately, the goal is to provide enough services before someone ends up in crisis in a hospital situation. And these three bills accomplish that, I would say, across the board, across the state, with ability to address many of the issues. And I'm sure that these three bills are bills that we will be looking at to make sure that they are funded. That was the ultimate goal that my co-chair in appropriations and I always want to make sure that we're not just funding something for 1 year unless it's a 1-year program. This is going to be ongoing, and so we made sure it was funded in future years.
Yeah, because and Greg, I want to pick up on that with you, if I may, not just mental health, as Kathy was saying, other programs. We've seen a lot in the press about the American Rescue Act funds, ARPA funds, which, every state has been receiving, but it's a sort of a one and done in many cases. And of course, one has to be careful about how that's spent. Like you said, that it isn't just spent for one thing and then it's not able to be carried on.
You actually get into the crux of, the disagreement between the two parties on the budget. But going back to what Kathy was talking about with kids' mental health across the board with adults and I know this from my law enforcement experience. The senator knows this from her experience in DOC, that mental health plays a enormous part in our judicial system and how people end up in it. Sort of intercept that, if you will, and get some intervention with kids earlier. We have a much higher success rate, but certainly the pandemic had an increase. I believe it was in appropriations where we got a letter from Connecticut Children's last winter saying that they have seen a notable increase in kids into their ED with mental health. So, but I do think, I will tell you sort of anecdotally from the 43rd that kids are responding, they're returning to normal at a great rate, and as you guys know, I'm involved in youth sports, and I know that enrollment in youth sports is up across the board from every sport, lacrosse, baseball, football, you name it. Kids are really getting more involved. I think they're doing better that way. But to the comprehension that was involved in the bills that Kathy mentioned, every kid's different, Brian. So what we tried to do as a legislature is craft legislation that was going to allow each kid a path to what's going to work best for them. Because in some cases, for the kid to do better, you need to provide services to the parents to give them better opportunity. Of course, we have DCF and a lot of social workers and agencies and social services that can be involved, but to sort of broaden the accessibility for each family to get into the place that they need to get those kids back on track. And that was something that we all worked on really hard together. There was a small subcommittee, bipartisan, that put a lot of work into it. And I think the final product is going to be great for everybody in Connecticut, all the families, for sure.
Let's quickly turn now to the taxpayers, of course. Tax is always a big issue for all of us, no matter, what our income levels. Connecticut taxpayers will see $600 million in tax cuts over the next year, including a continuation of things like free bus fare, 25% gas tax holiday through to December 1st, various other things as well. Kathy, talk to us a little bit about that, because it is a big issue for people.
It is a big issue for people. But again, when we talk about sustainability in the future, we want to make sure that we're not promising something that we can't keep in the future. And that has always been one of my greatest concerns. And as many people know, we had 70 years of non-payment of our debt service and pension liabilities to the fullest extent that they should have been paid. And over the last decade, we have been working on policies to grapple with, in particular, our unfunded pension liability. And why is this important for the tax issues? Because we are actually finally making a difference. 2 years ago, we not only paid what is called the actuarial amount, the amount that the actuaries say are required to be paid on our pension system, but we also paid an additional $63 million. And we were all seeing that the policies that we had put in relative to the return on investment and stabilizing the funds were finally coming to fruition. A year ago, we put $1.6 billion into our pension fund, and this year we will put $3.7 billion. When we ended the session, this very short session this year, we thought it was going to be $3.5 billion, and it's up to $3.7 billion that will go onto our pension funds. And what does that do for the future? It essentially decreases the actuarial amount that we will have to pay by about $400,000. This will also help us out to make sure that those important issues like mental health, like daycare, helping out our nonprofits who take care of our most in need residents, will be able to continue funding those programs. So these go hand in hand with each other. We did provide relief for child tax credit. I'm hoping people are applying for the child tax credit because the end date is the end of July. We did provide some back to property tax reform. Personally, I would like to see us do far more and not require our communities to count so much on taxes for school programs and for schools. Fully 60 to 80% of most communities' budgets are for the school system. And then we did a bit with the car taxes. I have a different way that I would like to see us do this. I think we should get rid of car taxes completely. I don't think that car taxes, many other states don't tax cars, and I think that we should get away from this. It's sort of ingrained in our state, and we have a couple of groups that don't want to see us get rid of this, Council on Small Towns and Connecticut Conference on Municipalities, because they count on that as part of their tax base in communities. I think there's other ways for us to handle this. And I think getting rid of the taxes on cars across the board makes it far more equitable, because we all know very rich communities like Western Connecticut, which has mill rates of 11 mills or 14 mills, pays far different for a car that is of equal value in another part of the state. So that's what I would have to say about that. I could talk about this, but I know Greg's chomping at the bit to get in.
I hear you. I just want to quickly ask Greg now, obviously legislators, you gave yourselves a pay boost, and it's the first time, I believe, in 21 years that has actually occurred. Just talk to us quickly, Greg, about that, because I don't think people actually realize that the legislator in Connecticut is part-time, and that, all of you have other jobs as well. And it is important because as much as people, don't like to see money spent, maybe they may see it unnecessarily, we need to keep legislators here, obviously, doing the important work that people like yourself and Kathy do. And obviously you need to be compensated for that.
Yeah, so we are technically a part-time legislature. Many of us do not do this part-time. It's something that, we do full-time plus during the session and, part to full-time during the off season. But part of the problem is, finding qualified people to run for office, and that was sort of the catalyst for that discussion. A lot of people announced that they weren't running again. And one person, actually a couple of people, one person in particular, Representative Wilson, actually said on the floor during announcements that he was not running again and said, look, the pay's just not worth it. He's probably right. The pay probably isn't worth it. But I think I've had this conversation in other interviews where, to me, I understand that. And I get that we need to incentivize good people because we need good people in the legislature for sure. But I also think that part of the deterrent isn't just money. I think it's the political atmosphere, among a lot of things. And I look at, my time in the legislature, my commitment there as a responsibility, certainly an honor, and a responsibility more than a privilege. And, it's something where I do it for the people of this district. And I think, and I said to somebody, another interviewer one time, I think globally, we have the last couple of decades, Brian, shifted to a society of me instead of a society of we. And I think that we need to raise our kids to be more embedded in their community, to be more a part of their community and more committed to it and focused in on it. So while I understand it, my fear becomes that we will have people that will, and it's not a lot of money, right? But to some people it could be more than they're making otherwise. And like I said, you have insurance and other benefits. But what I would hate to see is people who run for those offices. And I think we have this, nationally, who run for those offices for perhaps what I consider to be the wrong reasons, whether it be finances, insurance, elitist notoriety, whatever, that people do these things for. And it could have that backfiring effect. I will tell you that, and I think that my senator colleague will agree, I work really hard. I put a ton of time in. I will say to anybody who asks me, I don't know anybody who puts more time in than Kathy does. I don't look at it at no point in time when I decided to run again in 2022 did I say, well, is the money really worth it? That was never even a consideration. But I know that's me, right? And I know other people see it differently. But I get it. I just don't think it was the way to do it. I think we need to sort of make cultural shifts as a society to get more people to be interested in taking that spot.
I want to end the interview for both of you on the fact that it is an election year. You are both up for re-election. Kathy, obviously that's ahead. The elections obviously are later in the year. How busy are you going to be getting part of your re-election campaign?
I normally, for re-election, go out to every single community, knock on doors, make phone calls to people, respond to different events that people would like me to attend to make sure that hearing from the people and what they would like to see, both currently and in the next legislative session. My work week is generally 7 days a week, and generally I start before dawn and work through the evening just to address issues, to try to make sure that I'm not missing any of the very important concerns that people bring to me. So I expect to increase that workload as we move forward. I actually need to get out walking, so I'm looking forward to it. It's always important to me to meet people where they are, not expect them to come to me. So I'm very excited about the upcoming election cycle, very much interested in what people have to say. So I will probably be very busy.
I'm sure you will be. And Greg, you?
So for me, Brian, most of my campaigning, if you will, I take a different tact. I think that some of my colleagues do. I think, as Kathy said, engaging your constituents is important. But for me, a lot of that happens organically, between, my job with the police department and then my involvement with my kids and my community and all the different things that I do. I probably talk to, on any given average day, maybe 35 to 50 people. And it's not the same people all the time, different people that, because I go to the grocery store, I go to these places, and I only have these two towns. Well, now it's sort of changed a bit, but so it's easy for me to engage with people sort of organically throughout. Naturally, in the campaign season, you need to get, your positions out there, your platform, if you will, out there. But for me, it's been, and then as an incumbent, again, your constituent engagement sort of happens organically, and it's been happening for 2 years. People email you, get back to them, and that sort of spreads around. I think that people will say to their friends, well, one thing I know about Greg is I may not agree with him on this or that, but I know this, when I call him and need help, he's right there and he responds immediately. And that's where, like I said, it's not a part-time legislature when you look at it that way. I have 3 ongoing right now issues that I'm dealing with for my constituents that I'm addressing for them. So those are things that happen organically. And for me, frankly, I'm busy between 2 full-time jobs, basically, right? If you count legislature full-time. And then in the fall, as you guys know, I run that football program, and I have 92 football players and 70 cheerleaders, which 300 some odd parents I'm dealing with through the fall too, and scheduling and whatnot. But again, I do all these things. It takes away from my time to campaign, but if you look at it sort of organically campaigning in the process. So I get excited about it, like Kathy says, to be able to go out and say, this is what I've done for you for the last 2 years. I get excited to hear from people and get their input, so I'm prepared for the next session. And I know when I say, well, what my district wants, I know what I'm talking about. But there's parts of it that aren't exciting. And she knows this. It's sort of the dirty part of politics where you hear things about yourself. It's like, what? And it's part of how it goes. And you just have to deal with it. But when you have a young family, that gets a little bit difficult. And frankly, it goes back to what we were talking about before, those cultural shifts. Those are the things that I think about when I run again. What is this going to do to Shane and the boys? Who's going to say what this time? And it's unfortunate that and everybody, both sides do this. I'm not saying it's one side or the other, but this is unfortunately where our politics is. And those are the cultural shifts that I think that we need to make to incentivize more people to step forward and say, yeah, it's going to be a pleasurable experience, not a negative one.
Well, State Senator Kathy Austin and State Representative Greg Howard, it's always great to have you on the podcast. We wish you both success in your re-election campaigns. And of course, we look forward to speaking to you down the line as well. But in the meantime, both of you have a safe summer. We know you're both going to be very busy. And again, thanks for joining us on Connecticut East This Week.
My pleasure. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Brian.
Looking for a fast, friendly, and convenient local pharmacy? Then try the Nutmeg Pharmacy Group with 5 convenient locations in Eastern Connecticut. We're a full-service pharmacy supplying COVID vaccinations, prescription service, gifts, cards, and more, plus free local delivery. And it's easy to transfer to Nutmeg Pharmacy. Let us show you how. Find our contact details for our Higginham, Centerbrook, Moodus, Taftville, and New London stores online at nutmegpharmacy.com.
Green Valley Tree LLC is proud to sponsor Connecticut East This Week. Contact Green Valley Tree LLC for all your tree removal and plant health care needs and more. Find us at greenvalleytreeworks.com or call 860-234-4041.
Time now for a look at other stories making the headlines this week, sponsored by
Healing Therapies Through Sharing is Eastern Connecticut's holistic wellness center for those recently diagnosed or living with a cancer diagnosis and their caregivers. We offer a range of services including adult and pediatric oncology massage, lymphatic drainage, craniosacral therapy, yoga for cancer, and much more. For details about our full range of services and our team of licensed professional therapists and providers, visit our website at healingtherapiesct.org or call us on 860-443-0800. We look forward to hearing from you.
Connecticut ranks among the top 10 states in offering mental health services for its youth population. That's according to the latest report from Mental Health America. But could more be done? Edwin J. Vieira from the Connecticut News Service reports.
The Children's Hospital Association says in 2020, early in the pandemic, there was a 24% increase in mental health emergency department visits for kids ages 5 through 11. Bob Duncan, Chief Operating Officer of the Connecticut Children's Medical Center and Health System, says strengthening Medicaid's mental health investment is needed, and the nation needs more providers in the pediatric mental health system.
We don't have enough psychologists and psychiatrists to meet the demand needed. Currently, there are 10 child psychiatrists per 100,000 kids. It is estimated that we need 47 per 100,000 kids.
He shared his findings as part of a coalition that met this month with members of Congress and the Secretary of Health and Human Services. However, Duncan thinks the divisive political landscape could stand in the way of facing these challenges promptly and agreeing on dollar amounts for funding improvements to the system. I'm Edwin J. Vieira.
New Haven-based Gateway Terminal, which operates State Pier in New London and the Port of New Haven, is expanding their business to Montville. The company has secured the former site of AES Thames Cogeneration and West Rock Corrugated Packaging Plant as a road salt distribution center for the eastern part of the state. Steve Farrelly is the owner of Driven Enterprises, who had a salt business at State Pier until he was displaced by the Connecticut Port Authority as they redeveloped State Pier for the offshore wind industry. Farrelly says he isn't surprised by Gateway's move.
I believe that they're following my lead. I think they took a page out of my book. The fact that they're doing this proves that there has always been a need, which Driven recognized, and we addressed it 8 years ago for a salt pile in the southeast corner of Connecticut for better salt distribution.
Farrelly also says he looked at the site in Montville but had concerns about its closeness to residential housing.
When I looked at the property, that was one concern that I didn't want to deal with, the liability of, going up and down that road with trucks that you can't monitor all day long. Sooner or later, something could happen. And because you're in that residential area, I don't think that's a good mix.
Gateway suffered long delays and salt distribution issues last winter because of major storms, as they were the only facility supplying road salt to the entire state. Gateway say they hope to have their new Montville Salt Distribution Centre open ahead of the winter season this year. A new National Suicide and Crisis Helpline number has been launched by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA. The easier-to-remember 988 three-digit number replaces the older 10-digit National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. John Palmieri from SAMHSA is the 988 team lead and explains the changes and what people can expect when they contact the service.
The change came about for a number of different reasons, but the primary one is to ease access to the lifeline, for an easier to remember code for individuals who are in crisis to be able to access supports in real time through chat, call, or text. So when an individual calls, texts, or chats to access 988 services, they will be connected to a trained crisis counselor who will be able to provide support, to listen to what their concerns are, provide stabilization services, de-escalate the crisis, and then provide linkages and referrals to ongoing supports and services.
The new number connects people to one of 200 state and local call centers across the country, as well as linking into the Veterans Crisis Line as well. The Biden administration increased federal investments in the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline 18-fold from $24 million to $432 million to help scale up center capacity and services to those in need. The United States had one death by suicide every 11 minutes in 2020, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. People needing assistance can also access help via the Lifeline website at 988lifeline.org. And 4 eminent Connecticut women were honored recently and inducted into the Immigrant Hall of Fame. The annual event is held by the National Immigrant Heritage Center based in New Britain, Connecticut, and Demetrios Giannaros, the organization's president, explains why the Hall of Fame was created.
The Immigrant Heritage Hall of Fame was created to celebrate the diverse ethnic heritage of the American nation, of the U.S., by honoring individuals and institutions who exemplify the best of their immigrant and ethnic heritage, and those that have made significant contributions to their community, the state, the nation, and the world beyond us.
This year's inductees were all women, a first for the Hall of Fame and a holdover from 2020 and the Year of the Woman due to the COVID pandemic. One of them was interim president of the University of Connecticut, Dr. Radenka Marek. Marek is originally from the former Yugoslavia and came to the US in 2001 and says along with her other inductees, this recognition is a powerful message to women at a time when their rights are being eroded in the country.
So this is more than just about four of us being celebrated. This is about us setting the stage of the future for the young generations of the women, that they can get it done, that we are there to support them and be with them.
This year's other inductees were Judith Altman, a human rights activist and Holocaust survivor, Marilda Gandera, a business and philanthropic leader, and Chaplain Ida Mansour, a scholar and activist for interreligious understanding. That's all from us for this edition. Do send us your questions and story ideas to the show via our website at connecticut-east.com or Facebook or Twitter at Connecticut East and on Instagram at Connecticut East This Week. And you can listen to the show again on our social platforms, on demand, and by asking your smart speaker to play Connecticut East This Week podcast. And please like, follow, and share on your social media too. I'm Brian Scott Smith. Thank you for listening.